They didn't have the ideal build, but they became legends. One was way too short to be a keeper. The other, way too heavy to play football, but they proved the whole world wrong with a ball at their feet. In this video, you're going to meet 15 players who didn't even come close to fitting the mold for their positions, but still, they defied every stat and changed the game. Everyone knows the kind of goalkeeper that dominates modern football. Tall, long arms, a commanding frame, and the explosiveness to reach any corner of the goal. That's why short keepers, or those with a less than ideal physique, usually get dropped early in the youth ranks. But a few surprising exceptions broke that logic completely. Jorge Campos, for example, stood at just 1.68 meters, tiny for the position, and still, he was Mexico's starting keeper at a World Cup. His reflexes were so quick they looked like something out of a video game, and his leap made up for every missing centimeter. More than that, he was bold, so bold that when the team needed, he'd play outfield as a striker, wearing the number 9 shirt. And he'd score. He didn't just break the mold, he redefined what it meant to be a goalkeeper, and Mexico seemed to specialize in this. Oscar Perez, at 1.72 meters, also went against the grain. He played over 1,000 matches and represented the national team in 2 World Cups. And in Europe, Gregory Coupe also looked too small, but became known for one of the craziest reaction saves in history when he stopped 2 shots in a row against Barcelona in 2004. And then there was the Baker goalkeeper in the Netherlands, Jeroen Verhoeven, visibly overweight, but he still played for Ajax and shut a lot of mouths. Rene Higuita didn't fit the classic goalkeeper profile either, and not just because he was only 1.75 meters tall. Higuita acted like he forgot he was a goalkeeper. He'd leave the box dribbling attackers, ping long balls like a midfielder, and even took free kicks and penalties. He wanted to be involved in every part of the game. He'll always be remembered for one of the wildest moments in football history: the scorpion kick save at Wembley, where he dived backwards and flicked the ball away with his heels during a friendly against England. He was a keeper who balanced on the edge of theater, chaos, and genius all at once. If a keeper needs to fly, a center back needs to dominate. It's the role that carries the weight and the body of the entire defense. The ideal center back is usually tall, strong, and heavy set. He needs to win aerial battles, protect the box, and command respect with his physicality. That's why any player under 1.85 meters, too skinny, or a bit too technical, often gets pushed into midfield or even cut altogether in the youth systems. But once again, football showed that the body doesn't always define your role on the pitch. Carlos Puyol might be the best example. Short for a center back at just 1.78 meters and not exactly graceful on the ball, he seemed an unlikely elite defender. But you just couldn't drop him. Puyol made up for everything with heart, jumping power, and an unreal reading of the game. He was the type of player who looked like he was everywhere at once. And if Barcelona became what they did under Guardiola, a lot of it was down to his leadership and heart at the back. At the other extreme, Isaac Touré became the tallest defender in League One, an absurd 2.06 meters. With that height, loads of people thought he'd be clumsy, easy to dribble past, or too slow. But he proved to be solid and surprisingly agile for someone his size. And if height catches the eye, body shape does too. Steve McNulty became famous for looking like anything but a professional footballer. Overweight, slow, the look of a Sunday league player. He was mocked by rival fans. But he never missed an offside line. He was smart, organized the back line, and helped Luton Town climb the leagues with performances that silenced everyone. Lucio also didn't fit the traditional mold of a center back, but for a different reason. He was technical, confident on the ball, loved to dribble out of defense like a midfielder. Instead of hoofing it, he'd carry it forward. Sometimes, he'd go all the way to the edge of the opposition box. He combined physical strength with flair. In Brazil's 2002 World Cup winning side, he was one of the cornerstones and cemented his place as one of the best defenders of his generation. In each of these cases, what they lacked in body type, they made up for in reading of the game, courage, and personality. A good defensive midfielder is usually the one who covers every blade of grass, marks tightly, plays with aggression and physicality, and is basically the team's guard dog. That's why, when someone lighter, slower, or overly technical comes along, the first instinct is to doubt. The first to break that mold is Andrea Pirlo. Slow, not aggressive, never slid in, didn't go shoulder to shoulder. But it was like he played 2 seconds ahead of everyone else. He dictated the tempo with a calmness that drove opponents mad. That's how he led Italy to the 2006 World Cup title without having to outrun anyone. Sergio Busquets, standing at 1.89 meters with a slim, fragile-looking build, didn't seem to fit the profile either. He was slow, not physically imposing, almost looked sleepy, but he became the brain of the most dominant Barcelona side in history. He knew where to be before the play even developed, and that alone made him feel invisible and indispensable at the same time. On the other end, you had Marouane Fellaini, a towering 1.94 meters, big frame, bulky. At first glance, he looked way too clumsy to play as a midfielder, but he made the difference. He played key roles in many of Manchester United's wins. The attacking midfielder is, by definition, the creative brain of the team. They're expected to be light on their feet, agile, with great ball control and movement, and above all, quick thinkers. That's why when a playmaker is slow or has a more laid-back style, they're usually met with doubt. But some of those players went on to become legends. Juan Roman Riquelme, for example, used to walk around the pitch. Literally, he looked detached from the game, detached from the modern pace of football, but all it took was one pass to break down an entire defense. He didn't run, he made the game run around him. That's how he led Boca Juniors to historic titles and dazzled for the Argentina national team. His body didn't seem built for high-speed football, but his mind was always 2 seconds ahead. Zinedine Zidane also broke away from the mold of the agile and explosive playmaker. At 1.85 meters with a stocky build, he looked too heavy to be the conductor of a team, but no one treated the ball like he did. Just one touch could change the direction of an entire move. In the 1998 World Cup final, he scored 2 headers against Brazil and showed that class and control can outweigh any physical advantage. Marco Reus was always the opposite. Light, technical, fluid, but with one chronic problem. Physically fragile, he suffered injury after injury. Many doubted he could handle the demands of top-level European football, but every time he was fit, he was quick-thinking, creative on the ball, and decisive in big moments. And then there's the other extreme. Players so short they seem invisible in the middle of the pitch. Marcin Garuch, for example, is just 1.53 meters tall, the shortest professional player in Europe. It seemed impossible for someone his size to survive in such a physical sport. But not only did he survive, he made it to Poland's top flight. In his Ekstraklasa debut, he faced center backs nearly 2 meters tall and showed that space on the pitch isn't always measured in centimeters. Elton Arabia is another case. At 1.54 meters, with flamboyant hair, he looked more like a character than a star. But he led the modest Al Fateh on one of the most surprising title runs ever, winning the Saudi Pro League against millionaire clubs, and even scored the winning goal in the Super Cup. He was the little guy silencing giants, and he did it in style. Now, if you close your eyes and picture the ideal winger, you probably think of someone like Vinicius Jr. Light, fast, explosive, with skinny legs and the agility to change direction in a blink. That's the modern mold. The sprinter who stays wide, attacks in one-on-one situations, and makes the difference with improvisation. The type of player who looks like they were born to fly down the touchline. But not every winger followed that script. Shaqiri, for example, is 1.69 meters tall and built more like a rugby player. Broad shoulders, massive thighs, a solid upper body, and still, he was always dangerous out wide. His strength made it nearly impossible to take the ball off him, and his powerful left-footed shot became his trademark. He played in World Cups for Switzerland, scored screamers, and stepped up in big matches, even with a body type most coaches would call too much. On the other end of the scale, Nathan Dyer had the body of a 100-meter sprinter, just 1.65 meters tall, slim build, skinny legs. But despite his fragile appearance, he played a key role in Leicester's historic Premier League title run. His agility and quick turns made every defender look too slow. And maybe the biggest symbol of a winger that didn't make sense on paper was Garrincha. His legs were crooked. His style was awkward. He didn't look like an athlete. He looked like a glitch of nature. But with the ball at his feet, he was magic. He dribbled like he was born for it, twisted entire defenses inside out, and became a legend in Brazil and around the world. He didn't run like Vinny Jr., he danced. And in the end, that's what wrote his name into history. Now, when we talk about center forwards, the ideal one is usually a mix of physical strength, intelligent positioning, and clinical finishing. He needs to be in the right place at the right time and turn half chances into goals. Harry Kane fits that mold perfectly. Standing at 1.88 meters, he's the kind of complete striker every manager dreams of having. And it's exactly because he fits the classic profile that so many others, with a body or playing style totally outside the standard, were underestimated early on until they started scoring. Elton, for example, never had the physique of a top-level athlete. With a noticeable belly and a body clearly outside the norms of professional football, he was never taken seriously. But in the 2003 to 2004 season, he scored 28 goals in the Bundesliga and led Werder Bremen to the German title, earning the award for Best Player in the league. He didn't run much, wasn't quick, but always found himself in the right spot. His goal, in the 3-1 win over Bayern Munich, which all but sealed the title, became the symbol of his redemption. On the other end of the spectrum, Peter Crouch turned heads because of his height. At 2.01 meters tall, skinny, and awkward looking, many thought he'd be nothing more than a basic target man. But he surprised everyone with his technique and football IQ. He scored 108 goals in the Premier League and made a real impact for England, with 22 goals in 42 games. One of them, against Trinidad and Tobago in the 2006 World Cup, was unforgettable. He rose higher than anyone and smashed the header into the net, all that with a body that looked like it didn't belong in football. Romario, on the other hand, seemed too small for the role. At 1.67 meters and with zero interest in tracking back or pressing, he didn't have the build or attitude people expected from a number 9. But he had something no one else did. Perfect timing. He scored over 1,000 goals in his career, including friendlies, and led Brazil to the 1994 World Cup title. In the semi-final against Sweden, he scored the winner with a diving header, getting ahead of everyone. A striker who ignored the mold and found ways to score anyway. With Ronaldo, the issue was time. After his injuries came the weight, and many believed he wouldn't be able to keep up, but even out of shape, he was still decisive. In 2002, with that bizarre haircut and a baggy shirt, he scored twice in the World Cup final. The phenomenon didn't need to be at his physical peak to be unstoppable. And to this day, he's still considered one of the best strikers the world has ever seen. And when the problem is being too big, Akinfenwa turned that into his trademark. At 1.78 meters and over 100 kilograms, he looked more like an NFL linebacker. But when he played with his back to goal, no one could get the ball off him. Built like a tank, he became a cult hero in English football for his ridiculous strength, which clashed hilariously with his fun and lighthearted interviews. Then there's Kyle Hudlin, who plays like a walking skyscraper. At 2.06 meters, he's the tallest striker in English football. Huge, slow, looked stiff at first, but little by little he started showing he knew how to use his body, attack the space, and be decisive. When he goes up for a header, it's like no one else even has a chance to contest it. These players didn't have the perfect profile, but they had something even more valuable: timing, instinct, and the guts to not fit the mold. Because in the end, the most beautiful goal is the one no one saw coming.